Hey everybody, Super Dan here. We've got the next installment of the Modern Arnis Roundtable, what I title the Portland Connection. And this is really exciting for me because one of the things I pride myself on is being one of the longest training modern Arnis players in the United States. I started in 1980. Fred, Barbara, and Janisa started before me. They were in modern Arnis. They worked with the professor before I did. So we're talking some major history here. So anyway, you can see Fred, he's up there smiling. Hello, Barbara. Hi, Janisa. And I've got, decades and decades and decades of bruises, huge smiles, training together with all three of them. So uh, first, I just want to start off with a brief overview of each one of you's martial arts experience and background and so forth. So and we're going to rotate through different people starting at different times. So Fred is to my upper left-hand corner. Fred, tell us about your martial arts background.
Started when I was 10 years old with Kodokan Judo with Sensei Di Francisco. I wrestled through high school. And then my freshman year in college, I boxed. And then my sophomore, junior, senior year, I wrestled, and I was a walk-on, which means I was a piece of you know what. And they just beat me up for the first year and a half, but I ended up with a scholarship. And I ended up, by the time I finished, I was an assistant coach after I graduated. And that's when I started Kajikembo, Gaylor's Method. And Sifu Rich Manetti was got my black belt from him in 74. And then continued with Sifu de Cascos through about 84. Met the professor 78, someplace in there, and started training with him. And then trained with friends. Anyway, I trained with him, and then let me see. I got mentored by Wally J for about 20 years. Terrio Chinin, Gojaru for about 20 years. And I think that's about it. I mean, I won some tournaments, did some magazines, wrote some articles, things like that. So, and I had a school. I used to do, I ran some tournaments for about 5 years. I had a school for about 10 years, 12 years. As a matter of fact, Janice's in the building that I used to be in, which is cool, really cool, because it keeps that energy going, And
The lineage
I still
continues.
train, I
Yes.
still work out. I do everything I can. I have a ABT3 is my history, which means always be training, always be trying, and always be testing. So it's sort of my mantra that I use. And I guess that's it.
Okay, so I want to add one thing here. Fred, for those of you who are watching, Fred's selling himself short on, I competed a bit. No, he didn't compete a bit. He was one of the leading heavyweights in the Pacific Northwest area and did quite well on the national circuit. And so, yeah, a bit. No, I don't think so, Fred. You did well. You did really well. So, Barbara, your background.
Yes, I guess my first martial arts training was in Taekwondo, and that would have been like 71-ish. And then I used to, as legend likes to repeat, I used to more or less steal Kajikembo. I would go watch probably classes that Fred was in. Play their forms, punch counters and stuff like that. And finally, I realized I had a rule with myself that I wouldn't practice the Kajikembo I was stealing until I did whatever regimen I had for Taekwondo. And then finally I realized, I'm wasting all this time training in Taekwondo. And so I left Taekwondo and stayed with Sifu Manenti's class. So Fred and I actually trained a lot during the early years. A lot of times our Sifu was not present in the room. It was a few of us that were really committed that would practice. And our practices, it was at the University of Oregon, but the rooms were not always available. So we had, several rooms that we knew we could find each other in. And so when you went, you would just look in those rooms until you found. Right? Wasn't
Fond
that fun?
memories, Barbara, fond memories.
um, so then several of us went to Colorado. Fred went first, and a few of us followed. And we trained under the banner of Aldo Coscos for a while. And eventually, I decided that wasn't the way that I wanted to go. Where I was leading was not where I wanted to go. And so I moved back to Oregon, and sometime after that, Sifu Manetti also moved back to Oregon. And I started to open a school there. And then I'm trying to remember, because the way I met up with Professor Prasis was Fred had some sort of event at a school that I went to. When would that have been, Fred?
Oh, boy. My guess it was 79 or 80, right in there, some 79. I don't really remember. I remember Professor, I think it was 77 or 78. But I think I started having him in what Janice's school is right now. I had him up there, but I had met him previous to that. But yeah.
You also had some. I feel like I remember being in like a handball court or some little room at some point.
Yeah.
And so those early years with the professor were really extraordinary for all of us, I think. Somewhere in there, I practiced some Tai Chi, and there was some way in which the fluidity and continuity of Tai Chi movement and the fluidity and continuity of Arnis and just Kajukenbo itself, they all kind of really made a lot of sense together. Like it seemed like one thing. And after some time, of course, I could never really say which things came from.
Right.
Like a career, and I didn't really, martial arts wasn't my focus most of my adult life. I always had students. My students had schools. I did seminars for them. I tried to keep the family together. And only just recently, I literally retired. So I don't do any of that anymore.
Wow. Thank you, Barbara. Janisa, tell us your background.
Okay, the brief overview is I was an artist and a dancer, and I started in the late 70s, and I really started for self-defense reasons. And when you look back at that time in the Northwest, you'll see that there was a lot of serial killers and rapists. And I think from that, like the Ted Bundy era and the Green River Killer in Seattle area, Son of Sam in San Francisco, I think a lot of women at that time were going into martial arts schools. And the reason I went was for self-defense. And I started at Karate for Women. It was one of the first women's only martial arts school run by women for women.
Janisa, I think it was the first, not one of the, I think Colleen ran it as the first, yes.
I think that it was, but without further research, I don't want to say if it was, because it seems like it was very early on, the very first one. And I really thought I was learning self-defense and loved it, continued to train there for about 3 years and get a black belt. But it was really sport karate and point fighting is really what I got good at. From there, I left that school to train at the Grand Avenue School and under you, Dan. And from there, it was like a career for a few years in sport fighting. We had a school, Anderson Karate studio, karate studio.
Anderson
Still-
Cruzy Karate Studio, yes.
Yeah,
What
Anderson.
people don't know is that you and I were actually not only training partners, but we were dojo partners for a couple of years.
Yeah, in the Grand Avenue School.
Yep.
And it was great. It was the time of learning Bill Wallace kicking method, one chamber, and all the kicks came lightning fast movement, really fun point fighting. And I remember still standing outside that studio and seeing Mount St. Helen explode in May. And from there, I wanted to expand. And so I opened Women with Heart in North Portland. And at that time is when Barbara and I remember that we went to Fred's school, and it was at least the first time I was at his school for meeting Professor Praces and to have a seminar there. And so that must have been 79, 80, something like that. I went on to train Indonesian art. I also got rank in the Filipino art of modern Arnis, a 3rd degree black belt. And then I'm an 8th degree black belt in Indonesian art called Pukulan. And I'm continuing to train. I've actively run a school since 1981 and still have students right now and feel very inspired from teaching them, from furthering their training. And also I teach women's self-defense and develop programs. And what I think is that a lot of women at this time, and Barbara is part of this movement, and there are women all over the United States and Europe that went into martial arts schools to learn self-defense and found that varying degrees of whether it was Bondo training or forms training or sport fighting, that we weren't getting the whole picture, and that there was a lot of reasons that it wasn't just the serial murderers, but also people in our families abusing us and people that you know. And so we did a lot of work with the socialization piece of women's self-defense. And that program has, from the early 80s until now, been being taught at my school. We are teaching the Portland Parks. We are still very active in women's self-defense. And I can't say enough about what the weapons training did for my overall martial arts training, but we'll get into that later.
All right.
Excellent
Wow.
time. Now, actually, the next question, Barb and Janisa, you both answered, which is, when and how did you meet Professor Remy? So, Fred, you met him before any of us, and you've told me this story before, but this has got to be shared. When Leonard brought him over?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
tell us
Leonard
about that.
Trigg came over one day, middle of the afternoon, and I wasn't teaching, and it was in my small school and or smaller school. Anyway, he comes in with Professor. I didn't know him from anything, you know. I'm sitting there cleaning the floor, and he comes in with Leonard, and you know, Leonard's very soft-spoken guy, and he says, "Hey, Fred, I want to introduce you to somebody here," you know, and I'm like, "Okay, good." So I, you know, put my mop down and come over, and you know, he introduced him to me, and I shook his hand and, you know, welcomed him, and, you know, and he was this, I remember their first look, he had these like little bright eyes that were mischievous. You know, he had this mischievous, yeah, smile, and he was, you know, nice meeting you, and so, you know, it was nice. I needed to get back to, you know, I got to clean the school. I got people coming in, and then he, so Leonard was looking at me. He goes, "Oh, Fred, you know, let him show you something." And you know, I didn't even know what Arnis was. You know, honestly, I never even heard of it. He had said he was an Arnis practitioner, and I was like, "Yeah, okay." And back in my mind, all I could think about, I had to, you know, do the floors. So I said, okay. So he explained a little bit about it to me, and then I was like, ah, that's very good. And he kept looking at me. He go, and he later on he told me that he kind of got the idea that, you know, I needed something to get me my interest. So he says, oh, he says, get a knife. And I go, okay. So, you know, I look around and I grabbed a knife, you know, one of the wooden ones. Oh, no, no, get a metal knife. And I put it down and I pick it up like this. And he goes, stick me, stick me. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And so, you know, I just kind of do a slow stick at him. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, no, 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 you stick me. You must stick me. And I'm thinking, and by this time, you know, I mean, I like the guy, but I got to get the floor done. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to stick you. So I was right here with my hands right in front, and I just, you know, I went. And next thing I know, I literally, I hear this clanking sound, which is the knife falling probably 15 feet away. And my hands were empty. And I looked at this guy and I looked at my hand, and I was, you know, at that time, you know, that was 77. I don't know. I was probably 29. I mean, I was prime, you know, I mean, I was not messing around. Anyway, I went, oh, he said, hi. I just put the mop down and, you know, I'm in, man. That is, I was in right at that moment. It was like, you know, and it was he was so fast and it was so competent and it was so smooth. And he didn't do I gotcha. He just looked at me, you know, with that smile, and I went, oh, I like this guy. You know, I think after he did it, I actually I just looked at him and went, wow. And then I just kind of grabbed him and said, wow, you know, and he was like, yeah, anyway, that was the beginning.
Sweet. So,
Yeah.
Janisa, what was
Yes.
your first impression of the professor from your first training session?
Hmm.
And then impression of professor or impression of modern artist from your very first training session?
Well, I remember being there in the seminar and he demonstrated, and it was like his teaching and the demonstration of skill made everyone relax, but immediately the level of training that he had and that he showed and that he did effortlessly was higher than I'd ever seen. And I remember, I think I turned to you, Bones, and I like looked at you and looked back at him. And yeah, it was phenomenal. Like he would say, oh, you just do this, and then you do this. And then he would show 5 variations of that same disarm and that same throw. And it was exciting. It was like, this is a true master teacher. And I think I've never been in front of one in my life before.
Yeah.
Barbara, how about you?
Well,
Same question. Your first impression of not only the professor, but modern artist from your first training session.
I would say that like at the very beginning, I was stunned at the simplicity.
Yeah.
It was many of the things he was showing were so simple, and you know, there sometimes art is adding clay to the sculpture. Sometimes art is hacking away the unessential to reveal the art. And I feel like modern artists, as I saw it, like the simplicity of it is what struck me. It was almost too simple. I was skeptical. Can it really be that simple? Or is there any depth to this? Is that, you know, like, how do you grow from this simplicity into whatever it becomes, not knowing what that would be? And so that was really my first impression. Actually, and his demonstrations using partners were always like fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I remember about the early classes, and Cruzy can validate this, like we would try to work together, because we both had, like a lot of people in the room, didn't have any martial arts experience. So when it came time to drill something, we would work together, and he would come over and he'd very kindly separate us and put us with people who didn't know anything, so that more people would get that kind of hands-on experience with somebody who actually understood it. And he did it very sweetly, and while he'd let us work together, but mostly he wanted everybody to get it, not just the ones who got it.
And as long as I've got you, Barb, for the next question, Fred, you already told me your impression of him. That was a great story. But Barb, how well did you feel that your existing skill set prepare you for learning modern arts?
How well did I feel? I'm sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing.
Oh, okay. So how well did how well did your existing skill set? So you were already training in Kaja Kembo. You're already quite skilled. You're already tough from the Menenki group and so forth. How did that prepare you for learning modern Arnis?
Well, I actually think Kajikembo has a lot of Filipino influence. Therefore, some of what was going on in Arnis was kind of already embedded in Kajikembo. I would say the main thing, because Professor was very unstructured in a lot of ways, the main thing is, I could provide my own structure. I knew how to practice. I knew how to kind of keep working on something. I knew how to keep refining. So it was really only about the discipline. I think the preparation, it wasn't specifically technical. Mm-hmm. We were already teaching, all of us. So I think all of us studied not only kind of the technique that he was showing, but how he inspired people. I'll put it that way. Like a lot of people who came with no martial arts background were inspired and came back the next seminar, and they maybe never really took up martial arts per se in another system, but he always acknowledged their, I've said this to several of you before, but he always acknowledged incremental change. Like if you improved one little thing about what you did, he would make a big fuss about it. Right. And there were times when he would bring people up and he would go, "Look, they've got it." And I remember I'd look over at her like, "Is that it?" Because I'm not sure. But what he was,
do they really have it?
Was, they've got it a little bit better than they had it a minute ago. That's really what he was saying. And it was a powerful thing. And I would be shocked if all of us haven't used it since then.
Well, I'll make a interesting point here, Barbara. You got that easily 40 years earlier than I got that, because I was one of those that sit back and go, "They've got it. They don't. They're doing this, that, etc." And it was just actually when you and I were talking the other day, we had a private little Zoom call when you had mentioned that he would really acknowledge incremental change, and that's what he meant by when he'd bring somebody up and go, "Oh yeah, look at him, he's got it." Yeah, I never recognized that what he was doing. You brought that to my attention, and now when I look back memory wise, yeah, he did that. He did that a ton, and that's something they added even to my own instructing skill set. So, Janisa, you next. Same question. How well did your existing skill set prepare you for learning modern arts?
I think the existing skill set was really to be open to learn from any source. And maybe that was the Bruce Lee thing that really inspired, just learn from any source. And so I was ready really to see this master teacher. And one of the things I got from Professor Prasis was the flow. Like the how he taught was flow, how he worked with people, how the understanding of like transition. And to me, like there was early days martial arts, you can see all the books, there were hardly any videos, really stagnant. And so when he came, and he really in Portland, I think specifically, because when we traveled with him, he didn't teach the same he taught here in Portland. He did teach different in different areas. But for me, it was the lesson of flow. And it it changed and created a skill for me of being adaptive. And I was ready to learn that because I was ready to learn from any source, and I had an open kind of feeling. And so I was prepared for him in that way.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Freddie, same question. You know, how well did your existing skill set prep you for
Well,
learning modern arnis?
I think it was very parallel in this manner. In Kajikembo, it's steal what you can, get what works, bring it in. And, when somebody, I know this isn't maybe the best way to express it, but when I was growing up in this stuff, and from boxing and from wrestling, if somebody can kick your ass, then you're like listening. They can do something. I mean, it's all about in the end, it's self-defense. You can talk about everything else that goes with it, but it's integrity, it's honor, but it's self-defense. And so when you have somebody who can do something to you when you're not used to having it done to you like that, you kind of like go, oh my goodness. Now, as you get older, you start extracting from, at least you can extract from people maybe who aren't, can kick your butt, but they have something. And so, for me, it was, the Kaju way. So it was like, okay, he can do it. It's not just talk. It's for real. I got to
Yep.
learn. So
Gotcha.
there you go.
Great. So that leads me into my next question, and my own personal brief answer on this. What was your biggest martial arts takeaway? Now, for me, I was a karate boy, kick and punch, which is why I was resistive to when Fred tried to introduce me to the professor, and the professor had this incredible patience with my, Joe Karate champion ego. I didn't want any of this. He gave me a brief demonstration. It was like the same type of thing. Eyes popped open. My biggest, personal takeaway was it got me out of the Karate Joe mold and aimed me towards being a martial artist. And so that was like unbelievably huge. But Freddie, what was your biggest martial arts takeaway? And we'll get to the personal takeaways after this. But what was your biggest martial arts takeaway from training with Professor Remy?
I've been thinking about what that would be. Technically, I think it's the flow. It just, yes. And then you continue. Then you just continue. And there's a constant motion, but it has a depth to it that it's not just a physical, there's a spiritual and a mental aspect of that he was able to bring. And along with that, because it was part of the flow, and he was part of the flow that was doing it, and he had this smile and this joy, and I thought I loved the art, but he, I just, we spent a lot of time together, and it was joyous. It was anyway. If I had to name one thing technically that kind of went through mind, body, spirit, I'd say the flow it changed me dramatically in regards to everything I did, everything. So yeah.
Brilliant. Barbara, same question. Martial takeaway.
I mean, I think we all have engaged with the flow, but I want to talk a little bit about something else, and that is, he was very strong, and everything he did was committed from the floor up. It's like every little subtle thing he did had like a subtle body, leg action that drove it. And the weird part is, like, if he would grab and hold you, you it would be hard to escape, but yet he didn't grab hard. He didn't grab like strong like that. He would grab and hold you, and really he had you. And the same thing, if you look, he worked with cane in his hand for his whole life, and his hands were like baby's hands, not a callus anywhere on his hands. There's a way in which, it's telling of how the whole art worked. When he took the knife from Fred, it reminded me of a time when I was doing a demo in a tournament in Massachusetts, and we were doing machete fighting, and they had a darkened room so they could see the sparks. And at one point, I have to say, the sparks were like burning through my uniform. I was getting burnt. It was fast and furious, faster than I was used to working with him. And then at one point, I was flat on my back on the floor, and he had my machete. And I was like, I never felt him even touch me.
Right.
I mean, it's like the part of his art that I think we all, maybe all of us gravitated towards was the nature of how soft it was, at the same time that it was so effective.
Right.
And I kept looking for ways to always, actually one time, Dan, you gave me feedback about something about how it came from the floor up, the way that I was striking. And you could see it even then. That was probably like 30 years ago. But that's totally emulating him. Like, how does he have that kind of subtle, almost invisible body connection? Very different from the way we did it in karate. Very different.
Yeah.
Well, and Barb, let me I want to insert one thing that, and Fred had mentioned about being mentored by Terry Keenan, who is a Okinawan Goju-Ryu instructor. And I chatted with him one time, and usually the term go and ju are translated as hard and soft. And he told me he didn't like the word soft because it implied like a weakness. And with him, it was more like gentle but firm. And what you were just talking about exactly reminded me of how the old man would grab you, and he wouldn't do this white knuckle thing, leave white impression marks on you. But when he had you, and it was relaxed. There was this relaxed issuance of strength, so to speak, and hard to describe unless you've been grabbed by him. But that's exactly what it thought was the relaxed firmness. And then the other thing was that his total body integration. I think I saw Janisa nodding her head, and it's like, those of us who trained back in those days also had a type of martial upbringing where we integrated the rest of the body. So it would be, even if it was itty bitty, you could tell he was using his whole body, and he transferred that skill as well to us. That I think some of the later guys, they saw all the hands and all the sticks and so forth, but from the waist down, it was just basically something to hold your pants up to your belt. Well, the old man, he had the whole package. So anyway, that was good. And sliding over to Janisa. Okay, so what was your biggest martial takeaway from Professor Remy?
Well, I think being a real, like, he said some things about being a swordsman and the application of empty hand forms. Like we were teaching, and I think Barbara Bones, you were there, and Philadelphia, and we were doing simple forms. And then he started to show the application. And he said to me, I said, I've never seen this kind of application for just simple karate moves. He goes, well, that's because, why is that? I said, and he said, there aren't many swordsmen left. And I realize a big takeaway is the weapons training. I'm still very intrigued with weapons, bladed, whether knife, machete, stick, staff, spear, like everything with the weapons strengthens your physical body, and teaches you something that you can use in the empty hand, but the martial skill of learning about weapons, disarms, how to capture, throw in a weapons training like this was eye-opening. And I am still very much training in that and interested in it. So that really
One thing to that, your thought, Janisa, and that is, I think before training in Arnis, there was some, I kind of more or less like to draw people in defensively and counter. That was sort of my way of behaving. But after training in Arnis, you realize that the only safe place with those canes in the opponent's hand is like really far away or really close. And so the whole problem of bridging the gap actually was overcome. I think it's like one of the best teachers for how to move inside and get control on the inside. And I just love how kind of like, even with that extension and even with that potential harm coming from the weapon, in a way, it became easier to move inside of it and get close.
Right. By the way, I didn't mention this, but go ahead and feed off each other. So I'm not attempting to kind of go, okay, Fred, that's it. Barbara, that's it. Janisa, that's it. But Janisa said something, wham, that reminded you, Barb, of something. And so, yeah, this is the kind of interplay that if we were sitting down having coffee, we'd almost be talking over the top of each other.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing I was looking at. So anyway, so Janisa, you're the last person to answer, so you'll be the first on this one. A personal takeaway as opposed to any martial thing. What was your favorite personal takeaway from all your experiences with Professor Remy?
How much he inspired me in his enthusiasm and his teaching. Like, I don't think anyone had seen teaching the way he taught. And I'm now just very excited about teaching, about developing the connection in teaching, how to inspire people to want to continue to train. Really, just that, I think he did in every time. He was so excited in the way he connected. And Fred talked a little bit about that. Like, it is modern Arnis without him is really lacking that enthusiasm and that inclusivity. He also included everyone. Yes, the beginners, people who didn't know anything. They were part of it. We remember one seminar where we had worked for probably 3 hours, and so we were very exhausted. And he had us just bounce our cane on the floor and catch them and do these. He would just keep you going and inspire the skill of teaching, how he connected it, how he praised the students. That is huge for me and is still inspiring me today.
Right. I love it. Fred, what was your biggest personal takeaway?
Friendship, love. I mean, we were very close for the very time he started till he passed. And, just so much love, so much, long talks at night, and discussing things and his history, his life now. Just, I mean, but just, just a soulmate. I don't know how else to say it, and I'm sure he was a soulmate to many people. I just happened to spend a lot of time. I didn't travel. I know a lot of people traveled. I didn't. So I have no idea. But that's that's probably, yeah, that's all I can say.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But that's huge, Fred. That's like, that shows, yeah, he really connected a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think he really did, because when we traveled just a little bit to the seminars, he had groups of really like, top people in all the, like the Northeast region, in Seattle region, like different areas. He did that with people, really brought people together.
Yeah. And just so you know one thing here. Well, we're talking about love, group hugs, all that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. There was another part of him that
Yeah.
we used to fight.
Yeah.
I mean, we get the sticks out and we went at it. And, I mean, he was kind enough not to pound my head in. But it was, it got my hands, my arms, my shoulders, my head, he had, and he'd be going, and then all of a sudden he just accelerated and he'd just
Yes.
take you to a whole new place.
Yes.
And then,
I always took that as a personal acknowledgement, as like
yeah,
a
well,
ritual of passage. So he wasn't playing games or treating you like a beginner. It was like, okay, you're doing good. All right, now it's go time. Let's show levels of excellence. And
yeah,
you just go, yeah.
yeah, and it, yeah, and it was, one like to think that one's living a tough martial thing, but he had this love that he could give you at the same time. We'd pound him. I mean, he'd pound me. And, I was trying to remember, thinking to myself, because I've been doing this a long time, thinking, did I ever get him? And I go, because I was going to say, yeah, but I'm going, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
I wish I could say, oh yeah, it'd be tit for tat and we do this and nah, it wasn't, he was and even when we broke away, meaning, we weren't in close, we'd step out and step away, and then he'd just look at me, and then I, try to strategize, figure, like almost like, like you do in sparring, or like the Dog Brothers do, and except he never liked to put pads on anything. And then,
Oh.
and then it would be like, okay, and then I'd go low and try it, and he'd whap me. I mean, here. I remember he'd just go, oh, Freddie, you make a mistake. Like, and when he, he pounded, I went from first to fifth. I didn't, I got luck on, and then after that, he just went right to fifth. And I didn't know any of I learned some of the forms, and I didn't, and he did that in the presence of some people. And I'm trying to figure out what the hell he's doing. And then afterward, I mean, this is his mindset. Afterwards, he said, I said, Professor, thank you very much. What the heck was that all about? I didn't quite say it that way, but pretty close. And then he said, Freddie, you can fight. That is Arnis. You can fight. And I'm thinking of all the beatings he gave me. And then he put me up against some different people. And but the different people weren't even, they weren't even close to, they were black, they weren't even close to where he was at. So, and that was Freddie. And I'll never forget that. You can fight. Yeah, okay. except with you.
I'm going to take a stab at your question, Dan, and that
You were the next one I was going to ask.
Renegade
Rock and
person.
roll.
And my answer was love, really. It was kind of Fred's answer. That's love and generosity. I mean, he was very, very, very extremely generous with what he offered in the art to all of us. And I did travel with him several times and taught seminars with him in various locations and performed with him. And so at one point, early on, when he would want to do a demo with the, say at a tournament or something like that with the machetes, he would ask for volunteers, and a lot of people would move to the back of the room, actually.
Yes.
The women in the room would stand at the front and volunteer. Now, maybe they didn't understand the real life-threatening situation that it is at that point. And so finally, I went to a feed store and bought machetes. And I'm like, I'm going to figure it out anyway, because I can figure it out. You know, once I knew he was left-handed, it became like a lot easier. And so then the next time when I showed it to him, he asked me to do a demo in a tournament with the machetes that I mentioned before. And after that, after those demos during that period, when we would do with blades, people would come, like we did it in the Filipino section of somewhere in New Jersey, and they came up to me in a very fatherly way and told me, the people who are watching, that women don't do the blades. And I was like, well, you know, it's the United States, not the Philippines. We're just different here, you know. But the thing is not only, I mean, what he did is he said, okay, women can do the blades. And not only that, I'm going to trot them out front, and I'm going to show all these people who've been believing all this time that they can't do the blades, that that's bullshit. And so I think he had that kind of courage to go against what he knew his own cultural imperative was. Like in the beginning, when he ignored us, I think he was just operating out of the way it's always been. And then one day he saw it in person, and he was like, oh my God, you know, I better teach them because they're going to hurt themselves, basically.
I'm going to take issue with you on that. I think he recognized the warrior in you guys, because one of the things the old man was really good at was like, he would treat beginners as beginners, and he'd treat them with love, and he'd treat players as players, but he treated fighters as fighters. And I will tell you right now, with, you know, I don't know where I'd throw myself in the mix, but I know with you, Fred, Janisa, Barb, he saw you guys as warriors, and he respected that. From my perspective, he respected that much more than anything else. And then when you worked not only with, but gave him as good as you got, oh, that would take you way up high in his eyes. So
I agree. I think,
and the other thing is that I don't know if either Barb and Janice, I don't know if you guys knew about this, but boy, did you guys have a rep back. You guys had a reputation when you came out with Professor, and the way he put it was like, you know, he put you guys up with sparring with some of these knuckleheads, and then you guys would just kick ass, and then you'd be coaching with the in the Arnis seminar and so forth. So I had more people talking. Oh yeah, the women he brought with him. So, yes, I know who they are. I spar with them every Thursday night. We trade bruises all the time. So no, he respected you guys as warriors as well as lovers of the art. My perspective.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good. Just taking on Barbara's side about the sparking swords. So when he came and did he came in at one of the tournaments I had, and he said to me, okay, we're going to do sparking swords. And I had no idea what that was about. And so we practiced, in the, and we're going through it, and I'm going, oh, okay. It was Dumble Senawali, and then it got into some other things. And I was like, oh, okay. So that the next day we had the tournament that night. So we're doing it, and the lights start going off. I had no idea he was going to do the lights, and next thing I know, we're doing it. I can't see anything. And then I lose my cool because I don't know, sparks are going, we did the sparks, but I couldn't see anything. And he's doing this. And then, we're trapping and all that. And all of a sudden I'm losing where we're at. And he's just, continuing. And then I'm thinking I'm fighting for my life. Literally. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. And, and I was just trying to block and I'm trying to, and I'm like, didn't know. Next thing I know, just like Barb said, we're doing it. And I went out of control. I mean, there's no question. I was above my pay grade right there.
Yeah.
And I was out of control. And then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm on the ground. And I don't know how I got there. I was so thankful. I was so thankful.
What's
that I was
funny,
on the-
I mean, the time when it happened to me, he more or less was talking to the audience through the whole thing. Like, we were fighting for our life, but he was entertaining the audience.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
really
it was-
interesting. So you're bringing up the flint swords. I did that with him, and that exact same thing. Everything I was like, oh, this is a good opportunity. I really want to do this, and I'm gung-ho, enthusiastic. We're hitting this, the machetes and everything, and all the people are going, oh, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, those shiny blades with those sparks. And bam, down, done, out. So as soon as he felt that I
Yes.
lost control, which is the same story I'm hearing from you two for the first time, that he puts you down really quick so nobody gets hurt and chops off your arm or something. But
Exactly.
yes, it's memorable. It never has left my memory ever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And in Philadelphia, we also did something with, there was a guy in Philadelphia who had a lot of videos and always did the videos. Bones, you might remember who he is, but I can't remember his name.
Could have
But
been
we-
Jim, could have been Jim Cloud.
Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah, Jim
So
Cloud, Jim and Judy Cloud. Yeah.
he should have this video. We're doing the demo, and Professor had taught leg takedowns this way. It's almost like, looks like a yoga move. You kind of come in and extend one leg and take the lead leg and flip the person over. And all of a sudden I just did the movement and he was so happy. And it was out of the stick movement. And yeah, I think I love training like that. I love the spontaneity and
Yeah.
I like the risk. I think it's fun.
Yeah. Well, with him and Professor Jay, who became really, really close friends.
Brothers.
And Professor Praces is the one that got me to bring Professor Jay up. And then, we had a little threesome. But, well, it was the two of them, and I was the person who was paying the bill when we go and have dinner or something, and I'd be listening to them. But they started connecting, and next thing you know, because they're both, masters of what they do.
Yes.
And they both started, you could see the absorption of how they were able to, pull them together. And we go to dinner and each, I'd be the UK because, they'd be talking about, oh, this technique or that technique. And, then Professor Jay would show how he would do it. And then Professor Praces would show how he would do it. And, it was really cool, but they melded. It was like watching this, and they both had all this respect for each other. So, it was cool seeing real, people who were in love with their art and that connection that they make, and that, the heightened, where they go with that, where they can go.
Well, I
Anyway.
remember back in the ancient days, Professor Remy was first teaching how large his
Yes.
actions were. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, they started going from this big, huge to this little, and that was
Yeah.
after he met Wally J.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was talking with Wally J one time, and he said, a student came up to me. I was at a Praces seminar, and he's stealing all your stuff. And Wally J laughs. He goes, "Yeah, I steal from him too." They were so giving to each other. They were just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
boom.
Yeah. Dan, that's what I really remember after him meeting Wally J, that the trainings changed somewhat, like more wrist locks, more kind of close throws and locks, and like very different than just all the stick and disarm and throws, the bigger
Yeah.
throws and things. I definitely saw the difference and felt the difference.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we all felt the difference.
But I mean,
What'd you say, Bonds?
I said all of our little finger joints were in pain.
Right.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And all of that pretty much healed up. We had a student who tested, and the person she tested with had like bumps all over their head from the Filipino sticks that they demonstrated. Rhoda, she did a great job, unbelievable. And nobody got really injured, but little bumps. I'm sure you had those too, Fred.
I
We had a
think
All
big
mine have
bump.
gone down. They aren't hidden by Fred's hair.
Oh,
mind is how continuously his mind and his attention was always on his art. Like for example, you went to dinner and that's all they talked about.
Yes.
I'm in his apartment in Cisco. We could not sit down. We were standing in the living room,
yes.
exchanging technique. There was walking down the street and something would happen, and I mean, he was always, always, always intensely focused on his art.
Yeah,
And
that's well said. I mean, and he and Wally J were both of the same mind. Wally J, he was 70, and he'd be in my home, and we'd have that seminar and be midnight, and he want to show me this and throw this and do this lock, and and most of the people, and the two of them were like, this off. I mean, they were like.
Some of the best training happens outside the training hall,
Yeah.
outside the
Yeah.
seminars.
Well,
And
you guys remember I'm sorry to interrupt, Janisa. You guys remember the gigs over at Fred's after the seminars in the afternoon? You remember when we were over at yours, and Janisa, you, me, and Barb and Fred, and I can't remember if Dave Poole was there, but it'd be like for a week after a seminar, and we'd meet there every afternoon.
oh, speaking of Dave Poole, look what I found.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, is that when you beat him at the tournament when we
Yeah.
had the team fighting?
Yeah, I love team fighting.
Yeah.
It's when I really could just relax and had a whole group of people right there to support. I want to say one thing that's important, I think, when you were talking about Professor Prasis, is that one of the ways that he spread the art was by really exuding and getting us to understand it was the art within our art.
Yes.
That's
yes.
That's why we all thought that, oh, this is just part of my art. But in fact, it was his art. But it was like a gentle way of showing us what our forms were. His knowledge was so deep, and so the application of things, everything. But he said, okay, it's the art within your art. And then how many, like if you look at Taekwondo, and then the art within your art is the Filipino art. I mean, almost every style really went with that and brought Arnis into their system. And he was very charismatic in the way that he approached that and spread his art. So I just wanted to mention that because he always said that.
Good.
There's
That's
that have come to mind is about respect. So he was very non-traditional in terms of the formalities in class and things like that. But I traveled with him to a school, and when we are about to start his seminar, he was showing them kind of the salutation. And the instructor of that school said, "Oh, we don't do it that way. We do it this way." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And he walks over to me and he says, "Whatever I'm showing them, just continue to show them that." And I'm like, okay. And then what happened in the next 2 hours is he showed him probably the entire art of Arnis in rapid fire. I mean, like everything. And you
Filled the cup.
could leave and say he didn't show him anything. However, he knew, he was very clear that when he bombarded people like that, that they weren't going to retain it. And it's
Right.
like, if you're not going to give me that respect, this is how I'm handling it.
Oh,
And I saw him deal with situations where people didn't acknowledge who he was. And on the surface of it, it was always very kind. But having seen him in all the other situations, I knew what he was doing.
yeah.
So we all love and respect him to this
Yeah.
day. The other thing I wanted to say that I was remembering is that now in the early years when we were going to his seminars and such, I used to go to Portland, and a couple times Crazy would also come to Eugene, and we would practice together. And we would go out in the dark of night and be working on knife disarms and stuff in the park. And then we would one time we were at my mother's house, and it was like raining, and we were outside training with our sticks. And my mom comes out and she goes, "Don't you girls have enough sense to come in out of the rain?" And we were like, well, it's raining, kind of like, like that kind of passion that we all had, and curiosity, because he would say you could do this and you could do this, and you could only remember like a portion of it. But when we self-trained with our partners, I mean, in a way, he keeps us connected to this day. We're right here on this call, and the connections that we made between people because we wanted to train together and we wanted to work on it. It's something that held us all together, always.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, you're talking about respect and about what he did about teaching, he also, we would talk about it. And when he had seminars, I'd ask him if, because he didn't use me much as an uke, very rarely. And if there was somebody there he told me, if there was somebody there at mine or any place else that he thought needed some better understanding about the art, he would take
I like
them.
how you phrase that, Fred.
he would take that person and make them their, their partner, and with a smiling face, he'd give them the idea that, you get it. So he didn't suffer fools lightly, especially when it came to the art and being disrespectful. And I don't know if the person even got it. Who knows if people get it, but he did. Anyway, you brought that up.
It's funny because I think I was on his good side because following what you were saying, Fred, Professor and I were off to the side doing a drill, and I have no clue where this came from, but it's like maybe a 6-count drill or something. And then bing, I disarmed it. I'm thinking, what in the hell was I thinking? And I thought, oh, I'm gonna get killed. And I handed back the cane. I'm waiting for it. It was really funny because Sonny, that was very good. But you forgot one thing. I am left-handed. The cane was in my right hand. He puts it in his left hand. We start doing the drill again. And he takes me to school, but he took me to school kindly. I mean, he just obliterated me. But I think he saw that was an accident. So it's kind of like, okay, well, you can go here. Let's try here. And the funny thing was, the thing that I got out of it was that he had nothing to prove. It was just, okay, let's elevate it a little bit. Nothing to prove. So there was no vindictiveness, no, you got to get back at you or whatever. And I was mentioning earlier, or I was asking earlier, what was one of your biggest takeaways? And that having nothing to prove, I think, was something that he just plain exuded. Instead, he had something to share, and he shared it freely. One of the things I always mention is that, or the phrasing that I use is the art that he gave us. Yeah, we paid for a seminar, but if you take a look at levels of exchange, if we paid $50, we didn't get $50 worth of modern Arnis. We got about $1,000 worth of modern Arnis. I mean, what he freely gave, and for all of us, our particular lessons, and some of this I'm hearing for the first time, which is why I was really looking forward to the meeting. I was really looking forward to this because, God, such history. So the last thing, and I said we'll make this about an hour, and we're just a tad over an hour. What are you guys' favorite Professor Remy story? Fred, let's start with you. What's your favorite? It can be personal, it can be Marshall, it can be whatever.
Favorite. Oh my
Or
God.
if you have lots of favorites, give me one.
So we were sparring and we were doing sticks and it was live time. And so I was doing this twirling and setting up and all this. And he goes, Freddy, he says, this is how you fight. And I said, okay. He goes, no twirling. Come here. He goes, and then I have my hands here. He goes, okay, ready? I go, okay. And all he does is he takes the stick and he just goes, I was already twirling. And then I was twirling and moving. And then he just walked up like this and he went straight up my center. And he nailed my hand. I mean, nailed it hard and it fell out. And he looked at me and I was like looking at him. He goes, that's how you fight. And
Right.
it was just, and that's all he said. And I was like, and I had to go through because, I was doing this, I was stepping, I was trying to, jitterbug and all this other stuff. And he just stood there. He just stepped in and went straight up. So I did it on a few other people. We'd be doing that. And I'm just, it worked. It was just the twirl, I just came straight in. Anyway, that was a mind opener in regards to fighting with the sticks. Anyway,
Well, it's back to the simple, like,
yes.
that what we all saw was just do this. I mean, it was so simple, and all the layers peeled off, and this is what you do. It's not a straight line beats a circle. But
Yeah, and as I get older, I realize that his timing, his sense of direction, what he saw, how he saw me moving, all of those things were there to be able to just come up. I mean, anyway, that was it.
Denisa, what is your favorite Professor Remy story? Or if you got lots, give me one.
I think when he did a promotion, again, I think I went a couple, maybe 3 times to Philadelphia. There were Native Americans there that were police officers and things like that. I have a photo of that Mike Morton sent me, and I remember that professor said, "Oh, you got to meet Mike. He's a good guy." And Mike was this like barely moved kind of guy. He looked very scary to me. I never thought to talk to him, but I did finally at this seminar, and a very skilled fighter and a real strong Filipino practitioner with Professor. But at that seminar, they did promotions. So all these guys that came to that, he did this weird thing, and I was like, what are they doing? They got paddled with the sticks at their promotion. Do you remember that, Bones? Very unusual. And I was like, oh my God. And then when I
They
look
had
at
me saved a little.
Oh, okay, that was it. Because they all got whacked. And of course we didn't, but when I looked at the photo, I think there were only 3 women in the seminar, and it was very diverse, racially diverse. And we were early on always in seminars like that. But yeah, just I don't have something really individual or personal that I have to share with him about him, but I'm very thankful that I got to travel with him. He put us up front all the time to help him with teaching, and then he always taught us on the side. So that was really beneficial, and really changed my martial arts career, where I was headed, what I was ready for, and understanding new things that I was going to learn really is about the modern Arnis training, because it's all weapons based, which is very different. It opened my eyes.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Thank you. Barbara, favorite Professor Remy story?
But since you're just mentioning the camps in Philadelphia, so in one camp, a couple days in, so the camps were a week long. And a
Yes.
couple days in, he comes and he goes, Barbara, I must go to San Francisco. And I'm like, what? You can't go to San Francisco, you're teaching this camp. He's like, never mind, you will teach. And I'm like, no, professor, people paid for you. You can't go to San Francisco. He goes, I must go to San Francisco. I have an interview for my citizenship. And so off he went. And it left Cruzy and I face all those people who were really expecting he would teach them. So there was something about his freedom. And then one other very quick thing, we were having lunch kind of across there was like a natural food store kind of across the road from your school, Fred, which is now your school, Cruzy. Right, I forget what that store.
Grind.
Yeah, and we were in there having lunch and having a conversation, and I asked him what he saw when he looked out at a class of people. Like, what did he see? And he said, first he saw their light. And I'm like, their light? He said, yes, everybody has a unique light. And I'm like, what color's Fred's light? He looks at you, you're over getting a sandwich or something. And he's like, blue. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it made me realize, like, we learned a lot from him, but we didn't scratch the surface in terms of what his experience really was. I think, like, the freedom of him going to San Francisco in the middle of that and seeing people as light. I mean, he had another realm he operated in.
Yes.
Yeah, that's well said.
This was in the days of when there was no airport security. He'd open his wallet, or his bag, he would have 10 different tickets that
Yes.
that you could rearrange the tickets. And I remember him always like going, oh, I'll use this one. And, you could go to the airport and change stuff. And you could even change names on tickets. Like, it was total freedom with flying at that time.
Yeah.
And he carried a lot of cash.
Yeah.
A lot.
He had cash
in every city. I mean,
yeah. And they, when he passed, he had, we were trying to find where the money was. I mean, it was located, and he had said where some of it was, but it was trying to find them. But they're all over. He'd open up bank accounts, but he'd come to the house, and this would be before he was doing a seminar with me, and he'd have all this cash, and he'd go, Freddie, you need some money here. He'd open up his, he'd be like, you need some money. It's okay, and I'm going, no, I'm fine, Professor. This is, and he'd go, no, okay. I mean, it was like, whoa.
Oh, I'm sorry. This reminds me, I'll just add this one story from Philadelphia. So when he went to San Francisco, some of the participants in the camp were very challenging and you know, just kind of creating a headache. He gets back, he finds this out. And so he goes over to work with them. There were like 2 or 3 of them. He goes over to work with them and he says, well, let's see, you know, something from Arnis. And they show it and he goes, you must have a private lesson. And they're like, oh, okay. And he said, he calls us over and he goes,
Oh,
you and it's $100. And so he made him pay $100 to us.
to learn this, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Never heard that one before. That's wow.
And it's kind of the way he managed things was very funny.
Oh, I totally forgot about you running that I think he told me, but I think you might have told me, when he gave it to, when he told you to do it. And oh man, that is an awesome story.
Well, and difficult situation for sure. I mean, and that's the photo I have is that group.
Wow. Jeez, that is, oh. Okay.
Hey, well, any final words? I mean, it was juggling kittens just to get us all here at the same time. Because Janice, I know you're like busy with the school. Fred, you're the definition of busy. I'm nowhere near as busy as you guys. And Barbara,
I'm like, do anything anytime I want.
but I know Janice has got she gave me a very exact time frame. So I don't want to even come close to going over that. But any final words about what we've been talking about, or any advice?
I would just say it's great to get the opportunity to see you, Fred. I haven't seen you in a long time. I see Bones more often. And Dan, it's great that you are putting this together to honor Professor Remy Presas and to give more knowledge to people of the early days. I don't know if we got it all said, for sure we didn't, but yeah, it's very fun. I thought it would be. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you.
It's great seeing everybody. Totally 100%, Barbara and I are always connected. So it's great seeing you, Janisa.
Yeah,
it is. It's really, really, it brings out this brings stuff out. It's not just the past. It just brings stuff out that's so cool. That's the only word I can think
That's
of.
exactly what I was looking for when Brian mentioned about, Brian Zawolinsky has been kind of in the background orchestrating the roundtables. And I said, well, when you get Fred and Janice and Barbie together, well, I was thinking of you doing it. Kind of like, I mean, this is old home week.
I hope that that those who still are actively practicing Arnis remember his qualities and not just his technique. It's the musical reference, Dan, is like you can have the technique, but it isn't necessarily music until some other part of you gets expressed. Yeah. And the fact that he gave us this like amazing expression in ourselves is a tremendous gift. And I hope that that's still happening, that we're not just, it's not being reduced to technique or whatever, but the heart of Arnis remains.
Well said.
That was one of the other things about getting the 4 of us together, because the 3 of you, in my estimation, are much more feeling people. I mean, you guys speak from the heart, and I knew this would come out in our talks. We actually do have a biannual gig that goes on in Connecticut that has as close as to the feel of the most heartfelt Professor Remy seminars. and I've been to two of them, and they have just been epic. The students have all been there to learn. The teachers, I mean, it's like a bunch of little Remy's and Wallies running around together. We get along that well, and so it at least in that venue, I think the spirit still lives. And Bruce Jutnek, who I'll be interviewing in the next segment of the original Gangsters here, he had a saying which just really hit it right, which is, if you want to preserve the art, preserve the spirit.
Yeah.
And it just says it right there. And I think this particular get together, I think it exudes as much or more spirit than any other that I've seen in the roundtables, which is why I was really looking forward to connecting with you guys.
Yeah, keep the spontaneity.
Bingo.
Spontaneity, you got it.
Yeah, you gotta just go, and you gotta train outside the training.
Yeah.
Just go.
Yeah, go. I agree.
Oh,
Okay. On that note, I thank all of you, and damn, the only thing is missing is a good cup of coffee and a round table that we're actually sitting at. So I love it. I love it. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks,
Okay,
Dan.
bet.